I would now like to call to the podium the President of the Senate, Puerto Rico, Honorable Eduardo Bhatia.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much to the panelists, to the Center for the New Economy, and for all of you for being here. Thank you so much for surviving this conversation and making sure that a lot of the thoughts on what should happen in Puerto Rico actually take place. You know, I think there's an old philosopher, Karl Marx, economist, who used to say, philosophers have simply interpreted the world. The point, however, is to change it. So the question that brings us here today is, what is it that we have to do to change it? We know the problem of Puerto Rico. We were told already that some states went through the same problem in the 19th century. We are aware that some cities have gone through the same problems. We are aware that some nations have gone through the same problem. The question is, why are the solutions that were presented to those states and nations and cities are not, and the tools to have those solutions are not there for Puerto Rico? I think that's, for me, a starting point in the development of what should be the what to do and what could we do. Now, in terms of Puerto Rico, I think there are three things that we have been focusing on as a government. And sometimes I hear, and I keep hearing, and I'm sorry, I have to say this to vent for 1 minute. Oh, political leaders never do what has to be done. They never. I would challenge anyone to show me any state of the union that has done what Puerto Rico has done in the last 3 years, or any city that has reduced its budget by 20%, that has dealt with pension reform, that has dealt with the teachers' pension plan, that has actually cut every single collective bargaining agreement of every single labor union in Puerto Rico under Law 66, which was difficult and painful. I mean, I want to see anyone in the United States, and as I sit down with my colleagues, presidents of senates throughout the United States, we meet 3 times a year. They look at me and they say, oh my God. I remember the president of the Senate of Illinois telling me, how did this happen? And I said, look, it was very painful. I am a big supporter of labor and labor unions, and I have supported them in the past. And it's been so difficult to sit down and actually look at how is it that we have to cut our budget and see how do we have to come up with some sort of compromise. And the conversations are ongoing. Now, we have had to balance our budget. And in that sense, you're absolutely right. Balancing the budget requires having strict fiscal rules. And I think we should have strict fiscal rules. And I think what brings us today here is who enforces the strict fiscal rules and what are the consequences if you don't comply. So I will say it. I will say it, and it comes from me. Puerto Rico has overpromised over the years, and it has underdelivered. We have not delivered. We have not. And I think we should be delivering a lot more. Over the course of the last 10, 15 years, we have overpromised. Now, we have actually cut our budget, and we have increased revenues. In fact, we have right now what they call for the first time, taking out the debt of Puerto Rico. You have for the first time a balanced budget in Puerto Rico if you take out the payments that we have to make on the debt and the primary surplus. That's the first time we've had this in 20 years. This is the first time we're actually moving in the right direction in terms of balancing our budget. However, and I would argue that yes, we have to keep cutting the size of the government of Puerto Rico, but the problem of Puerto Rico is not the size of the government. The problem of Puerto Rico is the size of its debt. And if you compare oranges and oranges and apples, and I'll say this with a great deal of respect to the panelists, the size of the debt of Puerto Rico, of the state, it is the only 2 states that are bigger are New York and California, we're told this morning. However, we're not comparing oranges and apples. The reason why the state debt of Puerto Rico is bigger is because in Puerto Rico, unlike in the states, it is the state government that issues the bonds. We don't have a city of San Juan or a city in Chicago and New York. It is them, and it is the counties, and it is the school boards. You know, look at the bond buyer and you will find how many issuers of bonds there are. In Puerto Rico, it's the state government. And therefore, when you compare apples and apples, you can see that we're not too far behind from places like Texas and California and New Jersey in terms of what our debt looks like. That, misery loves company, but that's not what I'm trying to say here. My point is that don't just take Puerto Rico out on the side and say, oh my God, it is a unique circumstance unlike any other states. That is not true. There are many states that are very close to the situation of Puerto Rico if you actually compare their debt based on every single one of the issuers within the state, just like Puerto Rico is. The second thing I would like to say is, besides balancing the budget, we have to restructure the debt. And I haven't really heard today much about the fact that, yes, you can have as many control boards as you want. If you don't restructure the debt, and I think Antonio Weiss and U.S. Treasury have been saying this over and over and over and over again. It is unsustainable. Unless we have a mechanism to restructure the debt, it is absolutely impossible to move forward. So, I understand the discussion of the control board. I think it is really a discussion that is a waste of time if we don't restructure the debt. If we don't really restructure the debt, what are we doing? There's no way Puerto Rico will ever have access to the market just with a control board. It will have access to the market if it actually restructures its debt and it can actually comply with its commitments to pay that debt. Third, I would say that other than restructuring the debt and balancing the budget, which are two exercises which are pretty difficult when you're actually sitting on my seat, there's a third element which we kind of briefly talked about today, and that has to do, and I'll finish my remarks with this, that has to do with growth. All panelists mentioned growth, and I appreciate that. But then the question is, how do we get growth? Because there's a unique element of Puerto Rico. For the last 60 years, 70 years, the government of the United States has had a policy on Puerto Rico to encourage manufacturing. We moved away from agriculture precisely because the United States government wanted to make Puerto Rico a manufacturing hub. Minimum wage was instituted in Puerto Rico. Environmental regulations were instituted in Puerto Rico. You can go on and on and on in terms of why Puerto Rico abandoned agriculture. It makes no sense to grow a mango in Puerto Rico compared to the mango you can buy from the Dominican Republic. It is much cheaper to develop the agrarian products from the neighboring islands than it is from Puerto Rico. So the United States policy towards Puerto Rico over the course of the last 60 years was making sure that Puerto Rico was a manufacturing hub. You can take Section 926, you can take Section 936, you can take different sections of the Internal Revenue Code that focused on Puerto Rico becoming a manufacturing hub. Now, the United States decided, as a policy, to get rid of Section 936. And once it decided that, it took away not only 100,000 really good jobs, and if you do the math, like I did recently, take 100,000 jobs and multiply that by $20,000 each paying taxes. In Puerto Rico, they may be, sales taxes or income taxes or whatever taxes they pay. 20,000 times 100,000 workers in Puerto Rico. That's $2 billion in available cash right now. We would not have a problem right now to face our debt and make sure that we had our payments. But in fact, those jobs were lost after 2006. And what has been replaced? Nothing. And there's no discussion of anything else. And the idea that helping Puerto Rico create jobs is bailing out Puerto Rico, I think is absolute nonsense. And I would just say that this discussion has to, in the United States Congress, include a discussion of how to generate growth, how to create jobs, and how to make sure that whatever it is that we do to help the economy of Puerto Rico, it doesn't just stay with a fiscal control board. I will join my friend Pedro Pierluisi in saying that it will be detrimental for Puerto Rico if a control board is instituted unilaterally by the United States Congress. I think it would be rejected by the people of Puerto Rico. I think it would be rejected by the leadership of Puerto Rico. And I honestly think, my God, in the United States, trying to showcase the greatest democracy in the world, imposing a control board to tell the people of Puerto Rico how to spend their money, it's absolutely unbecoming. Thank you.